back, everyone, to the late night review, and I'm so happy to finally get to this movie. It's one of my all-time favorite movies, The Mechanic with Charles Bronson. This is just a movie I can't say enough about, and Charles Bronson is one of my all-time favorite actors. Really like him. Really like him. And when he passed away, that hit me. I was I took that pretty hard. He was always one of my favorites. And when Kirk Douglas passed not too long ago, I took that one hard too. He was always one of my favorites. Charles Bronson, if you haven't seen his movies, if you haven't explored his movies and you like action, you're in for a treat. I think you'll really, really like his movies. Charles Bronson in The Mechanic, he plays a hitman. Bishop is his name. They hire him to do hits. And this movie, it's strange because it's got an atmosphere where there's a beautiful subtlety about it. It's not explosions and action all the time and all the scenes, but it's got a pretty fast pace. The story drives it, and Jan Michael Vincent is in here, pupil of Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson didn't want him as his pupil, but Jan Michael Vincent will say he insisted, kept at him all the time, trying to figure out what Charles Bronson was doing, kind of suspected maybe what he did, maybe not. Kind of pushed Charles Bronson to teach him and just showed up at his house all the time, wanted to spend time with him and learn till finally Charles Bronson decided to do it. And yes, I did see the remake with Jason Statham, and he did a good job. Really did a good job. I enjoyed that movie, the new one, the remake. I really enjoyed myself. I like that kind of movie. But I still like the original the best. It's more grounded. It's more realistic. There were some realistic scenes in the new one, but the original was more realistic and more practical, using things that would probably work more. In the new one, I was actually surprised that they didn't use disguises to cover up their faces often when they did certain things, because in the day we live in now with cameras everywhere, Big Brother's always watching. Cameras everywhere, cell phones, all that stuff. But when Charles Bronson made this in 70, Michael Winner and Charles Bronson made this, I think it was 72, I believe, 72 or 3. Totally different world back then. Totally different world. Both were good movies. I enjoyed them both, but I like the original the best. I think that if you haven't seen this, you're in for a treat if you like action movies, especially if you like movies about hitmen, organized crime, or even the Death Wish series, which I love. The first 4, part 5, you can miss that one, but the first 4 are awesome. This one is along those lines, but a different character. In Death Wish, he was seeking justice, and here he's a paid hitman. Similar, but very different. Very different. He was kind of like a hero in the Death Wish series, and here he's a hitman, hired gun. His name is Bishop. He's quiet, calculating, thoughtful. He's a genius at his work. And this movie has, like I said, I think I said it already, that it's got a beautiful subtlety about it. It's almost like I can watch it and fall asleep. The music, the cinematography, the way it's shot, the characters, the interaction between Bronson and Jan Michael Vincent is really, really good. I enjoy it quite a bit. This movie and the new one has been probably seen by most action fans and people who are into movies. But if you haven't, I think you're in for a treat. And this movie is not only one of my favorite Charles Bronson movies, it's just one of my favorite movies, period, of all time. I like the action. I like the pacing. Charles Bronson says a lot by just his expressions. He doesn't have to speak a lot to get his point across. Just a look, just a stare. His behavior, just his body language can give you the point pretty quick and pretty direct. And that's one of the reasons he's one of my all-time favorites. I think he had more charisma than people realized. And I think he deserves more credit, because when I see rankings of action movies, I don't see Bronson mentioned as much as he should be when people do rankings. And often, though, I think that's because younger generations haven't gotten into him and haven't really explored him as much. I believe he was more popular in the past, but we can change that. I think a Bronson resurgence would be very, very welcome now to me, and it's overdue. Charles Bronson resurgence. A Charles Bronson resurgence. But they don't make them like they used to. They don't make actors like him anymore, really. Who knows in the future, but I doubt it. I don't think there'll ever be another Charles Bronson. One of the all-time greats, along with Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, Van Damme, all the Arnold Schwarzenegger, all the people I grew up watching. I think Bronson, he's always been right in there. Someone that I've always liked watching. And this is probably, if I were to really think about it, I think The Mechanic is definitely my favorite Charles Bronson film, along with, I'll have to do it. Maybe I should rank the Death Wish movies on the channel in the future, and then one day do a complete ranking of all Charles Bronson movies that I've seen. There's still a couple that I haven't seen, even though I've seen most of what he's done. There's a couple that aren't super action oriented that I don't think I've seen. Cabablanca. It's a play on the word Casablanca. Cabablanca. There's a movie he did. It's kind of a strange name. I've only seen bits and pieces of it, but it's not your typical Bronson action movie. And then there's another movie that a lot of people probably never seen before with Charles Bronson and Anthony Perkins. It's called Someone Behind the Door, and Jill Ireland, Charles Bronson's wife, is in there too. And I think the story is where Anthony Perkins wants to get rid of his wife, and Charles Bronson has amnesia, and Charles Bronson is a dangerous person, and he tries to use Charles Bronson to get rid of her by lying to Charles Bronson, lying to them both. It's an interesting movie. My wife actually likes it a lot. I like the movie too, but I love the Death Wish series, and I love Mechanic much more than that one, but that one's good too. There's plenty of Charles Bronson movies that I'd like to get to on this channel in the future, so stay tuned for that. Don't know when. There's a lot of other actors I'll go back to as well. But The Mechanic, if you haven't seen it, it's just one of the best. Like I said, the pace is pretty decent. It was made in the early 70s. It was a few years before I was born. I've seen it multiple times. I never really get tired of it. Like I said, the way it's shot, there's a subtlety about this movie that's really rich. It's really in the zone that I like, and I highly recommend it. And this has been the Late Night Review. Check out The Mechanic if you haven't seen it. I think if you like movies about hitmen or organized crime or just action, I think you'll enjoy it. If you love a fast pace where there's always explosions or you get bored, it might not be your cup of tea, but the pace is pretty decent. It's actually kind of fast for what it is. Good story. I like how he takes Jan Michael Vincent to different places and basically explains the job and the philosophy behind it. And this is after he told Jan Michael Vincent what he did, after Jan Michael Vincent just kept prodding him, just kept asking him over and over again. And after Charles Bronson analyzed and really sized up Jan Michael Vincent for a while to study his personality, his characteristics, and what he liked and what he didn't like, then he felt like it was safe enough to bring him in. And yeah, this movie is really a classic to me. And there's a surprise ending for those who haven't seen it. I could spoil it, but I won't, just because I think there's a lot of people who haven't really explored Charles Bronson enough and maybe haven't looked at his movies enough. So I'll just kind of let it go and let you watch it. So I won't spoil it. And I think so many people have seen this movie, but then younger generations haven't. And it's really a good film. I really like it. And when he takes Jan Michael Vincent around, showing him the ropes, explaining different things, like in the wax museum, takes him to these different displays of different historical figures and fictional figures. And he was making the point that sometimes people who operate outside the law end up as heroes. Even though they're criminals, they might end up as heroes. And he's kind of giving him his philosophy, and it was a really interesting scene. It's a scene I like. Takes him to a restaurant, explains different things to him, shows him different ways to set up the mark, different ways to hit people, and what's clean and what's not. And then he takes him to this karate class and explains stuff there. He shows him a karate match and everything. And I really like that. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. I really like those scenes, and it shows that he's not only Charles Bronson's not only mentally tough and he knows how to do his job, but he's physically fit, and he's always been physically fit. I think he was 50 something when he made this movie, and he was like a year later, or 1 or 2 years later, he made Death Wish. And both of those movies, this movie and Death Wish, he was in his early 50s, I believe. Great shape. And anyway, the interaction between him and Jan Michael Vincent's really good. Takes him to, like I said, the karate class, and he takes him shooting, teaches him how to shoot, teaches him a lot, and those scenes are really, really good. Like I said before, there's really a beautiful subtlety about this movie. There's something about this movie that draws me to it. Yes, there's not explosions and action all the time, but it does have that. It does have explosions. It does have action. It's a pretty fast pace. Not too fast, but fast enough. And the story is really good. I like the way it's shot. I like the scenes, the characters a lot. Really like the characters a lot. I think Jan Michael Vincent really fit the part in here too. I've always liked Jan Michael Vincent. Defiance with Jan Michael Vincent, if you haven't seen that, that was a good movie too. I think him and Charles Bronson really make a good team in here. Really do. And it's good to see them pair up, and he's teaching Jan Michael Vincent the ropes, his character the ropes. And it's fun. It really is. I like the way it's done. Michael Winner was always a great director. I think this is one of his best films, along with the Death Wish movies that he directed. And it's an adventure. It's got a surprise ending for those who haven't seen it. It's worth checking out. This has been the Late Night Review. Like and subscribe, please, and share this video. And for now, until next time, good night, everybody.